Hi guys and welcome to the video. So this is the second video of the day and it's Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1 Episode 5. This is officially halfway through this first season. Now, firstly I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who continues to support the channel. It really means a lot to me that you're all interacting with the channel. It's really great to see. Secondly, I just want to try and clarify something with regards to this show. I was a little angry in my last video about how derivative new Star Trek is and how much that episode resembled other shows, that I didn't really do a proper review of it, and I didn't really do it justice, I feel. So I'm looking at this show now as a form of reboot. It's a reboot of Star Trek. So I'm going to try and approach it from that point of view so I can give you a better rundown and try and get past some of the really big issues that I have and try and give you the best review that I can give you. So let's get into this episode. Quite frankly, I find myself at this point being very, very confused about this particular episode. It was like an intermission episode. It was trying to be fun, and in some ways it worked. In other ways, it kind of didn't. The characters opened up a little bit more than they have done in previous episodes, and we got to know some of the fun side of this new crew. I say new crew, half new, half old crew, but new, old, rebooted crew. So the episode opens with Spock at a Vulcan marriage ceremony, clearly his marriage ceremony, to Pring, and Pring sees him and he's suddenly a human. He's got human ears, human features, and she says, "I cannot marry a human." It turns into a ritual fight with Spock and himself, his human side and his Vulcan side, which I thought was a pretty interesting nightmare, as it turns out to be. So Spock wakes up, clearly it was a bad dream. He goes to the mirror and checks his ears are still Vulcan, although I do have a bit of an issue with the Vulcan ear makeup. They do look very rubber. Now, I'm not sure whether this is a callback and tribute to the bad makeup of the original series, or whether it's just bad makeup. But it does look like Spock's got a rubber ear on it. It looks like something you could buy in a shop, you know, a joke shop or a costume shop. That's one thing that did stand out for me, other than Spock's sideburn. So the Enterprise is docked at Starbase 1, is it? I believe it's Starbase 1. And the crew are on leave for a bit of R&R after the recent escape from a black hole. T'Pring comes to visit Spock, and she says that both her careers have basically gotten in the way of their relationship, and it's time for them to spend some quality time together. However, being as though Spock is working, she's also working, and they agree to have dinner later on that evening. We cut to a briefing with Admiral April, Spock, and Pike, and Uhura. Uhura is literally everywhere, being a cadet. She's everywhere, whether or not this is part of her training. Pike is wearing the green uniform. The green uniform we see Kirk wearing. Don't know if there's an official name for it, but it is the variation of his gold uniform. It's the green uniform, which I thought was a nice touch, really. There's species that could potentially be joining the Federation. They've had negotiations with Tellarites and Klingons, and it hasn't gone very well. So they're looking for entry into the Federation, if I'm not too much mistaken. Pike is put in charge of the talks. Now, these aliens just show up in this meeting. Pike introduces himself. They seem to like him. They seem to get along with him. He introduces the rest of the bridge crew, and they all sit down and have a natter. Meanwhile, the crew are preparing for R&R. You have Nurse Chapel, we have Ortegas, and Dr. Benga. Dr. Benga wants to go fly fishing. Nurse Chapel and Ortegas are going... They could be going for a pub crawl, for all I know. They're in the transporter room, and And Benga let it slip about a nickname they have for number one, and it's her nickname is Where Fun Goes to Die. This is a very odd nickname, but I think it should be more of a tagline than a nickname. But regardless, she's not impressed with that at all. Spock makes his way to T'Pring and he's late for dinner. And she strolls out on him in a mad strop, stating that he's unable to sacrifice his career for her and be in a relationship. Cuts to Chapel and she's talking to her not boyfriend, but semi-serious, probably a fuck buddy. She's talking to a fuck buddy, I think, who's getting a little bit too serious for her liking. She spots Spock. She spots Spock over at a table. Before this guy can get too serious, she goes, "Oh, I need to go and talk to my friend. Just bear with me," and buggers off. and she's like, "Phew." Cuts to Discount Drummer, and she is, yes, I'm still going to call her Discount Drummer, although, you know, she does start perking up a little bit in this episode, so she may yet escape the name Discount Drummer. But she's with number one, and they're strolling through the corridor talking about, you know, the nickname. There's a security breach in one of the airlocks, and it turns out it's just two officers being naughty, doing naughty things. Cuts back to Spock and Chapel, and they're having a conversation about relationships. Chapel says to Spock that, you know, you've got to make sacrifices in your life for your relationship. You're a Starfleet officer in a position of respect, and you're the science officer on a ship, but you've got to make sacrifices in your career for your partner. That age-old argument. In this scene, she calls Spock an idiot and playfully slaps him across the side of the head. Isn't that technically assaulting an officer? She says you've got to loosen up, you've got to try and see things from her perspective. Cuts to Spock and T'Pring, and he suggests a mind sharing so they can see each other's point of view and he can understand her point of view. They start this ritual and all the lights go out. And yes, they Freaky Friday'd. They have body swapped. T'Pring is now Spock and Spock is now T'Pring. They're not quite sure how to handle this situation. And at this point, this is where it got a little bit predictable. Pike's in his quarters and Admiral April strolls in and says, "Hey, done gone, the negotiations have gone south. They really don't want to talk to you anymore. They want to talk to Spock for some reason. They want to talk to Spock, they won't talk to you. You didn't do a very good job of this, Chris. They want to talk to Spock." And I'm thinking, oh, what a shock. Spock's unavailable at the minute because he's actually in his girlfriend's body. So Spock and T'Pring are trying to reverse swap their bodies, get themselves sorted out, and they physically can't do it. So they're talking about how best they can hide this from everybody, even though telling the truth would probably do them well at this point. And Pike's at the door, he's ringing the bell, they don't know it's Pike yet, and they're having this conversation about how best to hide it, how best they can try and get this sorted privately. They open the door and in pops Pike. They decide to become clean with Pike, and Pike, because Pike has basically said, "I need Spock, I need you for these negotiations, they'll only talk to you." So they decide to come clean, and then they say, well, this is a problem, but I think T'Pring's going to have to do it in Spock's meat sack. So T'Pring as Spock goes with Pike to sort out the negotiations. Cuts to Drummer and number one. They're outside the brig, and Drummer shouts, "Bad cop!" She wants to be the bad cop, which means number one's going to have to be the good cop. And the interrogation scene is like it is pretty much like them interrogating small kids. That's what it felt like. It didn't really feel... There was elements of levity there, a little bit of fun. You got Discount Drummer being all like, why are you doing this? There's got to be a reason you're going to tell me now, otherwise you're going to get court-martialed. Whilst number one is interrogating the other one, and she's being all nicey. They actually come clean and say it's essentially like an Enterprise bingo. They play Enterprise bingo. They get told off and they get to leave. And they walk out and number one says, "What the hell is Enterprise bingo?" And she asked a question that I was actually asking in my mind this entire time. What is Enterprise Bingo? Turns out it's just juvenile games that some of the lower decks play. Some of them are just downright dangerous, of course. But hey, kids and their toys. Spock T'Pring's body, Spock's mind, gets a call from T'Pring's employer. And T'Pring, she brings in criminals for rehabilitation, but Vulcan rehabilitation. She gets a call from her boss, possibly her boss. Obviously it's Spock, but the boss doesn't know that. And she has to go and try and track down a criminal Spock into T'Pring's body has to go. My God, this can get confusing. Cuts back to Discount Drummer and number 1. Discount Drummer's got the list, the bingo list of the stuff that they have to do, and they decide to act like juveniles and have some fun. Which one of them is in the medical transporter. La'an is chewing gum, and number 1 beams her out. She beams her out when all the flavour's gone, and then beams her back, and it still tastes like spearmint. Number 1 crosses something off of the list. This list is, from what I can make out, it's not very clear. It doesn't give you a very clear picture on what it is, but as far as I can tell, and I've got it here, which is actually here as well, it's use transporter to replace gum. To replace gum. I'm sure that's what it is. Drummer's got some gum, the flavour goes, and she uses the number 1 uses the transporter to replenish the gum in her mouth, or replenish the flavour. One of the next challenges is to call for 2 different locations on a turbo lift. Whoever calls it first, or whoever the computer recognises, wins the challenge. It's like, I don't know, destination roulette or something. And then have a phaser stun duel. And Drummer shoots number 1. I mean, they seem to be having fun. There were moments where I did crack half a smile. I am capable of cracking half a smile. So yeah, Enterprise Bingo. Dumb or funny? I really don't know at this point. I'm so confused. Cuts down to Ortegas and Chapel. And down a bridge walks T'Pring, Spock. Spock into T'Pring's body. And she wants to talk to Nurse Chapel. She... Oh my God, it's a minefield these days, isn't it? Spock into T'Pring's body, talks to Chapel, explains what's gone on, explains she needs some help bringing in this criminal. We get to the negotiation table, and Spock, who isn't Spock, it's T'Pring in Spock's body, is kind of fudging the negotiations a little bit. Pike's able to watch, but he's not able to join in. And he decides to interject and speak well about Spock's character, even though it's T'Pring that's sitting there in the Spock's body. They're impressed with him sticking up for Spock, but is really T'Pring. And I'll say something about these negotiation scenes, okay? That is just an absolutely stunning backdrop of the Enterprise. And it looks, don't get me, I'm really warming up to this Enterprise, the 25% different one. Don't get me wrong, I still love the original very dearly, but that is a pretty nice beauty shot. Did I say something positive about New Trek? They basically adjourn the negotiations, the aliens do, and they give Pike one last chance to negotiate. So he gets Spock out of that, Spock to bring out of that tight situation. We have a little scene with Benga, who's really enjoying his fly fishing. He's kind of just there. It's kind of just showing him enjoying his vacation. Spock, who's in T'Pring's body, and Chapel approach this criminal who T'Pring needs to bring in because he's a criminal and he needs to be rehabilitated. But it's Spock in T'Pring's body. He insults Nurse Chapel by basically calling her an ape. I don't know. I think she's a damn fine, attractive ape. I'm really getting a thing for Nurse Chapel. Don't tell the wife. In fact, you know what? Tell the wife. I don't care. She won't care either. Nurse Chapel. Nice. They try to bring him in with logic, and it turns out a punch works just as well. And Benga and Chapel devise a way for them to be able to swap Spock and to bring back solely for the purpose of me getting it right in this review. Isn't that nice of them? They switch them back. There's an awful lot of screaming and yelling, and T'Pring and Spock are feeling very much appreciative that they are back in their own bodies. Spock thanks Nurse Chapel. It's clear that Nurse Chapel's just got such a desire for Spock. She doesn't like being friend-zoned by Spock. You know, the person who doesn't like relationships but is really falling in love with Spock. Spock and T'Pring promise to make more time for one another. Obviously, body swapped back. Pike's at the negotiations and they're saying, you know, why should we join your federation? Pike decides to, I think it's called extreme empathy or something like that. He basically goes, well, yeah, in your position, why would I want to do this when it's not really going to benefit me all that much? He basically uses all the reasons he can to convince them not to join the Federation, which makes them join in the end anyway. He's got some moments, but they seem kind of shallow. Look on Robert April's face, which is like, what are you doing? Anyway, they get up and walk away after saying thank you. Pike explains his hunch, because it is a hunch. He wants to try and get this species into the Federation. And they actually fly the flag of the Federation. They leave the space station, go onto their ship, and then fly the flag of the Federation. At this point, it cuts to Discount Drummer and Number One, and they're walking on the outside of the ship without spacesuits and in a force field tunnel, which, if the Enterprise gets even the slightest power cut, they could end up exposed to the vacuum of space. I said in one of my previous videos that I think Number One is a bit of an idiot, and that I didn't like just Discount Drummer. But I'm warming to Discount Drummer just a little bit. So I didn't want the force field to drop, which is progress. I think I've grown as an individual. So they go out onto the ship, and this is one of the things on the Enterprise bingo bucket list that they found, and they sign the hull, which all the lower cadets do. They go out into space. Ortegas and Chapel are talking in a bar about relationships and how she let this guy go because, clearly she's just in love with Spock. We all know it. And Spock's like in love with T'Pring, so that's just not going to work, is it? Now, there's a lot of problems with this episode, and there's a load of things I could bring up. But most importantly, I think this episode was kind of fun. It was. I did smile at it. Maybe it's because I was in a good mood from just watching and reviewing the Orville earlier. As far as I'm concerned, this was a real fun episode. It was trying to be fun, and in some ways it worked, and in other ways it didn't. But I think that's going to be a more subjective thing for everybody. Not a lot of story-wise happened in this episode, and it was very scatty and all over the place. I felt like they kind of wasted the T'Pring Spock body swap a little bit. You had the negotiations, the Spock T'Pring thing. You had the Discount Drummer and Number One having fun thing. Some of the concepts were quite good. I'm not going to lie. The Enterprise bingo sounds like fun, but it just sounds dangerous. It sounds like there are elements of like Starfleet jackass in there. This episode was definitely a filler episode. There wasn't really much to it, but it did try and have fun. But ultimately, it wasn't your typical episode of Star Trek. And I think, to be fair, it's better to view it as a reboot. That way, if you've bookended Star Trek before, New Trek can't really touch that. Someone said in my comment section that I view things with rose-tinted glasses, certainly older Star Trek. That's simply not the case. I just think that it was far superior to this in so many ways. Yes, it had its flaws. Who knows? We're halfway through the season. I think it's going to be interesting to see where they take the final 5 episodes. After all the seriousness of previous New Trek shows, yeah, I must admit, I'm starting to see the lighter side of this show. I'm open to see what they come up with next. So I really appreciate everybody stopping by and watching the review. This review was probably as scatty as the episode was, so I do apologise. But I did everything in sequence, it's all there. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for watching me. If you are new here, consider subscribing to the channel. I do have other videos on the channel. Feel free to check them out. If you like this video, then hit that like button and I will see you in the next video. Until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, take care, and bye-bye for now.
Stop the violence of the war in my head. Time's the healer, the eraser of all done and said. And as I fall back to my shelter, I know I'll only find peace in your smile.